Bitcoin, huh? It's been on a wild ride lately. Up, down kind of makes you wonder what's really going on, right? Like, how high can this thing actually go?
And that's what we're diving into today, right? Trying to
Yeah,
figure that out. What's hype? What could really happen with Bitcoin?
exactly. We're going deep into the research on Bitcoin's future price.
Mhm.
And one of the most interesting things I've come across is this idea that Bitcoin's success isn't just about the technology, it's about how widely it's adopted. Am I right?
Yeah, you're absolutely right. A digital currency, any digital currency, it's only as good as the number of people who are actually willing to use it.
So how do we even begin to understand where Bitcoin might be headed? Like, how do we predict the future of this thing?
Well, one way is to look at this thing called the adoption curve. Basically, it breaks down the stages of how any new technology is adopted by, the masses.
Okay, I love a good visual. Can you walk me through this adoption curve?
Okay, so picture this brand new gadget comes out, right? The first people to buy it, those are the innovators. They're tech savvy, they're always on the cutting edge, willing to take a risk, experiment.
They're the ones like beta testing everything before it's even cool.
Exactly. Then you've got your early adopters. They see the potential in something, maybe they dabble a little bit, but they come in pretty early. Think of them like your trendsetters.
Okay, got it. So where does Bitcoin fit into all of this right now? Is it still just for the techies and the early adopters?
So it's a little more complicated than that because there's this third group called the early majority. And these are the folks who need to see some proof, right? They want stability, regulations, mainstream acceptance.
They're not ready to just go all in on something super experimental.
Right, exactly. But, and here's the thing, we are starting to see signs that Bitcoin is moving from that early adopter phase into the early majority.
Really? Like what?
Well, think about it. You've got major institutions, financial institutions, adding Bitcoin to their portfolios. You've got governments starting to create clearer regulations around cryptocurrency.
So it's not just like tech kids in their basements anymore.
Exactly. This is getting serious. And that shift is a big deal for understanding those predictions about Bitcoin's price, the ones I'm talking about.
You mean the whole Bitcoin is going to $10 million thing? All right. Yeah, let's talk about that. Like, who's making these predictions and what's their reasoning?
Well, one of the biggest proponents is Michael Saylor.
Oh, the MicroStrategy guy. He's really into Bitcoin, right?
Yeah, to say the least. He has been buying Bitcoin like crazy. He sees it as digital gold, a safe haven asset, especially during times of inflation.
Okay, yeah, I've heard that term before, digital gold. But isn't gold, a physical thing? What makes Bitcoin comparable?
Well, that's a great question. Saylor's argument is that just like gold, Bitcoin has a limited supply. There will only ever be 21 million Bitcoins, ever. And that scarcity, combined with the fact that it's decentralized, meaning it's not controlled by any government or any institution, it makes it resistant to manipulation and inflation, just like gold.
So it's like scarcity equals value. Makes sense. So who else is in this $10 million camp? Who else besides Michael Saylor?
Another big one is Cathie Wood and her firm, ARK Invest. They're known for kind of, taking some risk, betting on new technologies. And they see Bitcoin as a really important part of the future of finance.
Okay, so what are they seeing that maybe we're not? Like, what has to happen for Bitcoin to actually reach these, kind of impossible heights?
So this is where it's really important to understand the idea of market capitalization, or market cap for short. Basically, imagine the total value of all the Bitcoin that exists. That's its market cap. For Bitcoin to hit $10 million per coin, its market cap would have to be astronomical.
Astronomical, like bigger than Apple, Google, Amazon, all those combined.
Oh, way bigger. We're talking bigger than the entire economy of Japan.
Wow. Okay, that's wild. Are they seriously suggesting that Bitcoin could be bigger than entire countries' economies?
It's not quite that simple. What they're saying is that they think Bitcoin will become like a major reserve asset.
Yeah.
Potentially even replacing traditional currencies, maybe supplementing them in some cases.
Instead of relying on banks and governments.
Exactly. It would be a huge change, but that's the kind of scale we're talking about for Bitcoin to get anywhere close to those prices.
Okay, so we've got these massive changes in the entire global financial system that would need to happen for $10 million Bitcoin to even be possible. But what if it doesn't, reach those crazy heights? What are some other potential scenarios?
Well, let's imagine. In a really bullish scenario, we could see more and more institutions adopting Bitcoin, like Big players keep investing, regulations become more favorable, maybe the technology gets even better, faster.
So Bitcoin keeps climbing that adoption curve we were talking about earlier.
Exactly. In this scenario, Bitcoin could reach, $200,000, maybe even higher in the next decade. Really solidify its place as that digital gold.
Okay, well, that's still a massive gain. What about a more moderate outlook?
Sure. A more moderate scenario, you'd see steady growth, but maybe slower. Adoption would continue, but without any major disruptions. Think maybe $100,000 to $150,000 per Bitcoin in the next 10 years.
Still nothing to sneeze at. Okay, so we've talked about the super optimistic, the moderately optimistic. What about the other side? What could cause Bitcoin to stagnate or even decline?
Yeah, that's the bearish scenario. And in that scenario, you might see governments cracking down on crypto, maybe even banning it entirely in some places. Or imagine a major hack, a security breach that just like totally shakes people's confidence.
Ouch. Yeah, that would be a tough blow for Bitcoin.
For sure. And if that happened, we might see Bitcoin struggle to hold its value. Could even drop below $30,000.
So there's a real range of possibilities here. Everything from life-changing gains to maybe hold off on that yacht purchase. It's clear this is a complex issue. What are some of the biggest factors influencing Bitcoin's journey?
One we haven't really touched on yet is the whole energy consumption thing.
Hmm.
Like the amount of energy it takes to mine Bitcoin, that's a big concern that has to be addressed, if this is going to work long term.
That's a really good point, and it kind of speaks to a bigger picture here. Whether Bitcoin hits $10 million, $100,000, or totally crashes and burns, this whole conversation just shows that something much bigger is happening.
Absolutely. We're talking about the evolution of money itself. For centuries, we've relied on these centralized systems, right? Governments, banks, but Bitcoin, it represents something totally different.
It's a system that's decentralized, where transactions can happen directly between people, no middleman.
Exactly. Whether Bitcoin is the answer or not almost doesn't matter. It's got people talking, it's sparking innovation, it's making us question the very idea of value exchange.
Wow. When you put it that way, it makes those price predictions seem almost beside the point.
In a way, yeah. I mean, they're attention-grabbing for sure. But the real story here is this massive shift, technological and honestly ideological, that Bitcoin represents.
So where does this leave, our listener who's trying to make sense of it all? If you had to place your bets on Bitcoin's future, where would you put your chips? And what information would give you the confidence to make that decision? That's something to think about.
Going back to that question of where to place your bets, it's really easy to get caught up in those big predictions, right? Like Bitcoin to the moon.
Yeah.
But if you really want to know what to think, you got to look a little deeper.
For sure. So how do we cut through all the noise? How do we actually evaluate those scenarios, the bullish ones, the moderate ones, the bearish ones, and figure out which one is most likely?
Well, remember how we were talking about market capitalization? You asked if those $10 million predictions meant Bitcoin would be bigger than entire countries.
Yeah, and honestly, trying to understand a market cap that big, it's almost impossible.
It really is. How do you even picture that much value? So let's try to make it a little bit easier to grasp, right? When you hear $10 million Bitcoin, what that really means is it would need to be worth more than all the gold in the world, all the stocks, all the real estate, everything combined.
It's kind of mind-blowing when you put it that way.
It really is a hard thing to wrap your head around, that level of value. So when you hear those really bullish predictions, you have to think, is it realistic for Bitcoin to get that big?
Okay, so market cap is one thing to consider. What else should we be paying attention to when we try to figure out, assess Bitcoin's potential?
Well, don't forget about those early majority adopters, right? The ones who need to see some stability, some regulation before they jump in. That's going to be huge moving forward. If governments can actually agree on some clear rules for cryptocurrency, that could really boost confidence, lead to more people using it. But if governments start coming down hard on crypto, that could really hurt, couldn't it? Oh, absolutely. Regulation is tricky like that. It can help Bitcoin grow, or it can really hold it back, And that uncertainty is something to keep in mind as you're doing your research.
Okay, what about the technology itself? Are there any, advancements or limitations that could impact where Bitcoin goes from here?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, we got to remember that Bitcoin isn't the only cryptocurrency out there.
Right, right. There are tons of them.
Exactly. And some of those other cryptocurrencies are being designed to be faster, cheaper to use, maybe more tailored for specific things. So that could make them more attractive than Bitcoin for certain uses.
So it's not just competing with, the traditional financial system, it's also got to compete within the crypto world itself.
Exactly. It's a constantly moving target, right?
Yeah.
Now, some people will say that Bitcoin has an advantage because it was the first.
Yeah.
It's got the name recognition, but it can't just coast on that forever.
So it sounds like a lot is riding on Bitcoin's ability to keep up, to innovate, to stay ahead of the game. It's not just about the price today. It's about, like, can it survive long term?
That's a great way to put it. It's easy to focus on the hype and the price predictions. But the bigger question is, what does Bitcoin need to do to stay relevant, to stay valuable in the long run?
And that brings us back to that question you asked earlier, where would you place your bets?
Man, that's a tough one. Honestly, there are some really smart people on both sides of this. You've got people like Michael Saylor and Cathie Wood who are all in. They think Bitcoin's going to change everything about how we think about money.
They see it as the future of money itself.
Yeah, exactly. But then you've got other people, equally smart, who are a bit more cautious. They point to how much the price jumps around, the challenges with regulation, the environmental concerns. Those are all valid points, too.
So then where does that leave us? How do we make sense of these different perspectives?
Well, I think the most important thing to remember is that nobody can predict the future, right? We can't say for sure what will happen, but what we can do is educate ourselves, look at all the information, and then make decisions that feel right based on our own risk tolerance, how comfortable we are with potentially losing money, and our own personal financial goals.
So it's less about being right or wrong and more about understanding all the different factors and making choices that align with, like, our own individual situations.
You got it. There's no right answer for everyone when it comes to Bitcoin.
Okay, so we've talked about the big picture, the different scenarios, the people involved, the importance of doing your own research, but let's get practical for a second. What are some concrete questions that someone could ask themselves, as they're trying to figure out if Bitcoin is right for them, if they should invest?
Oh, I think that's such an important question. Yeah, let's get down to brass tacks.
Let's do it. So let's get down to it. What are some questions people should be asking themselves if they're thinking about Bitcoin? Like, should I invest? Should I not? What should they be considering?
Well, the first thing, and honestly maybe the most important, is to think about your risk tolerance. Like, how comfortable are you with risk? Because Bitcoin, it's known for being really volatile, right? The price can go up and down like crazy.
Yeah, it can definitely be a roller coaster, right?
Exactly. So you got to ask yourself, am I okay with maybe losing a big chunk of my investment, even overnight? Like, can you handle those drops? Or are they going to keep you up at night, worrying?
Yeah, you really have to be honest with yourself about that. It's easy to get excited about potential gains, but you have to think about the downsides too.
For sure. And beyond your own personal tolerance for risk, think about your goals. Like, what are you hoping to achieve with your investments? Are you trying to make a quick buck, or are you in it for the long haul?
Because Bitcoin's future is still so uncertain.
Right, exactly. If you might need that money back soon, Bitcoin's probably not the best idea. Yeah. But if you're thinking long term and you believe in the whole cryptocurrency thing, then Bitcoin could make sense as part of a diversified portfolio.
Right. Diversification. That's important for any investment, isn't it? Don't put all your eggs in one basket, especially not with something as unpredictable as Bitcoin.
100%. And this is where it's really, really important to do your homework. Like, don't just listen to what people are saying online or, those attention-grabbing headlines.
Yeah, easy to get caught up in the hype.
Totally. So dig a little deeper. Try to understand the technology behind Bitcoin. Read articles from sources you trust, sources that give you both sides of the story, the good and the bad. Maybe even talk to a financial advisor you trust.
Because ultimately, the more you know, the better decisions you can make, right?
Exactly. The more you understand about Bitcoin, the more you'll be able to navigate this whole world, make choices that align with what you're trying to achieve.
Well said. So we've talked about a lot today. We've looked at how Bitcoin gets adopted, the whole market cap thing, the potential it has, the risks involved. It's complicated stuff.
It really is. And you know what? We're still in the very early stages of this whole cryptocurrency thing. Bitcoin's already shaken things up, but who knows what the future holds. It's exciting. It's a little bit scary too, right? But it definitely makes you think.
It really does. So as we wrap up this deep dive on Bitcoin, I think the biggest takeaway is this. Stay curious, stay informed, and don't be afraid to keep learning, keep asking questions. The world of Bitcoin, the world of cryptocurrency, it can feel really overwhelming at times, but it's also full of opportunity if you're willing to explore. And who knows, maybe what you learn along the way will change how you think about money, technology, even the future itself. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive into the future of Bitcoin. Catch you next time.